What is a rectangle? To figure out what a rectangle is, let's take a look at this figure. This figure is a rectangle. So, let's use this figure to see if we can figure out what a rectangle is. Taking a look, we can see that this figure has 4 sides. Well, a 4-sided figure is a quadrilateral. So, we have a quadrilateral. But what makes this quadrilateral a rectangle? Let's try to figure that out. Taking a look at the sides, we can see this side and this side. It looks like those sides are parallel to one another. And if we extend out each one of those sides in either direction, look at what we get. We get a set of parallel lines. These lines will go on and on forever without ever intersecting. So, these opposite sides are parallel to one another. But what about the other sides? Well, if we look at this side and this side, it looks like those sides are parallel to one another too. And in fact, if we extend out those sides in either direction, we get another set of parallel lines. So in this figure, the opposite sides are parallel to one another. Now, let's look at those sides again. Here we have this side and this side. We know that they're parallel to one another, but they also look like they're the same length. And in fact, in a rectangle, those opposite sides are indeed the same length. That means that they're congruent to one another. So, we can write this statement here. This symbol means congruent to. So here we're saying that side EH is congruent to side FG. They're the same length. And if we want to indicate that on our figure, we can write this mark right here. Drawing this mark on each of these sides indicates that those two sides are the same length. Now let's look at our other sides. This side and this side. We know that they're parallel to one another, but they also look like they're the same length. And in fact, they are. Here, side EF is the same length or congruent to side HG. And if we want to indicate that on our figure, we can draw 2 marks, just like this. These 2 marks indicate that those 2 sides are the same length. So, our opposite sides are parallel and congruent. Let's take a look at the angles. Looking at the interior angles of this figure, it looks like they're all right angles. And in fact, they are. Here in this rectangle, we have 4 right angles. And we can indicate that by this little box. Since they're all right angles, that means that each of these angles measures 90 degrees. So, we can write that the measurement of angle E is the same as the measurement of angle F, which is the same as the measurement of angle G, which is the same as the measurement of angle H. And each of these angles measures 90 degrees. I think we now have enough information to define a rectangle. A rectangle is a type of quadrilateral that has 4 right angles. Here, we see that we have 4 right angles. So we have a rectangle. And because each of these angles in this 4-sided figure is a right angle, that means that the opposite sides will be parallel and congruent. Now rectangles fall into a couple of other categories of 4-sided figures. So let's look at some other ways that we can classify rectangles. Well, we just said that a rectangle is a type of quadrilateral. So, a rectangle can also be called a quadrilateral. Remember, a quadrilateral is just a closed 4-sided figure. And since all rectangles have 4 sides, that means that all rectangles can also be classified as quadrilaterals. Now here's another name that we can give to a rectangle. A parallelogram. A parallelogram is a 4-sided figure where the opposite sides are parallel and congruent. Well, we just said that in all rectangles have opposite sides that are parallel and congruent. So that means that all rectangles are parallelograms. But not all parallelograms are necessarily rectangles. Take a look at this parallelogram, for instance. Here we have a parallelogram. We have 4 sides, and the opposite sides are parallel and congruent. But look at the angles. The interior angles of this parallelogram are not right angles. In order to be a rectangle, all 4 angles must be right angles. Since this parallelogram does not have that quality, it is not a rectangle. So now we know more about rectangles. A rectangle is a 4-sided figure where all 4 interior angles are right angles. They each measure 90 degrees. And a rectangle can also be classified as a quadrilateral or a parallelogram.